The cabin was already full of noise before the plane ever left the ground. Overhead bins slammed shut, children complained, phones buzzed with last-minute messages, and the low hum of the engines seeped through the floor like a restless warning. It was one of those flights where everyone seemed tired before the journey even began. Alicia Brooks sat in her seat near the middle of the plane, one hand resting instinctively on her belly. She was 6 months pregnant, far enough along that her body no longer let her forget it, but not far enough for strangers to always notice right away. She wore a loose beige sweater, comfortable pants, and sneakers that had become her default choice since swelling made anything else unbearable. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her posture careful. This trip hadn't been easy for her to take. Her doctor had hesitated before approving it, warning her to stand, stretch, drink water. Alicia had promised she would. She needed to see her mother, who had recently been hospitalized. Missing this flight hadn't felt like an option. The man seated beside her shifted, elbows spreading into her space. Alicia leaned slightly toward the window, adjusting herself with a quiet breath. She didn't want to draw attention. She rarely did. A few rows ahead, a flight attendant stood in the aisle, assisting passengers with bags. He was older than most of the crew, his movements sharp, his voice loud enough to carry. His uniform was immaculate, hat tilted just right, authority radiating from his stance. His name tag read Greg. As Alicia settled, she felt a familiar tightness in her lower back. Sitting for long periods had become difficult. She waited until the aisle cleared slightly, then raised her hand gently. "Excuse me," she said when Greg passed her row. Her voice was polite, measured. "Could I ask for a seatbelt extender, please?" Greg stopped abruptly and looked at her, his eyes scanning her body in a way that made her immediately uncomfortable. His gaze lingered a second too long on her stomach. "For you?" he asked, eyebrows raised. "Yes," Alicia replied, keeping her tone calm. "I'm pregnant." There was a pause, not a thoughtful one, a judging one. Greg let out a short laugh, not loud enough to be playful, but loud enough to be heard. "Seatbelt extenders are for people who actually need them," he said, "not for people who didn't plan ahead." The words landed hard. The man beside Alicia froze. A woman across the aisle looked up sharply. Several passengers nearby went quiet, the kind of quiet that meant they were listening very closely. Alicia felt heat rush to her face. Her heart began to pound, not from anger at first, but from shock. "I do need one," she said, her voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. My Dr. Greg cut her off. "Ma'am, pregnancy doesn't automatically mean special treatment," he said. "We're already delayed. I don't have time for unnecessary requests." Unnecessary. Alicia swallowed. She could feel her eyes stinging, but she refused to let tears fall. Crying never helped. Crying only confirmed what people already assumed. "I'm not asking for special treatment," she said quietly. "I'm asking for safety." Greg sighed dramatically and glanced around, aware now of the attention. "You should have chosen a seat that fits you," he muttered, "or maybe thought about flying later." The implication hung in the air, ugly and unmistakable. Alicia's hands curled into fists in her lap. Memories surfaced uninvited. Doctors dismissing her pain, co-workers commenting on her body, strangers touching her belly without permission, and always, always, the sense that her body was somehow a public inconvenience. A young woman a row behind leaned forward. She asked politely. She said, "That was rude." Greg shot her a sharp look. "This doesn't concern you. It concerns all of us when you talk to someone like that," another passenger added. Greg straightened, clearly irritated. "If everyone would mind their own business, we could depart on time." Alicia stared straight ahead, her jaw tight. She felt exposed, like every inch of her body was under inspection. The man beside her leaned slightly closer. "You okay?" he whispered. She nodded once, even though she wasn't. A different flight attendant approached from the front, younger, her expression already tense from sensing trouble. "What's going on here?" she asked. Greg waved a dismissive hand. "Bosner wants an extender she doesn't need." The younger attendant looked at Alicia, really looked at her face, the strain around her eyes, the way she was holding herself. "Ma'am?" she said gently. "Are you requesting a seatbelt extender?" "Yes," Alicia replied. Her voice cracked this time. and she hated that it did. I'm pregnant, and the belt is uncomfortable. That's absolutely fine, the attendant said immediately. I'll get one for you. Greg scoffed under his breath. We can't just hand them out to everyone who feels uncomfortable. The attendant turned to him, her tone firm. Company policy allows seatbelt extenders upon request. No explanation required. For a moment, Greg looked like he might argue. Then he saw the eyes on him. Dozens of them. Watching, judging. He stepped back. The attendant returned quickly with the extender, kneeling slightly so she could help Alicia secure it. I'm sorry about that, she whispered. You didn't deserve it. Alicia nodded, unable to speak for a second. When she finally did, her voice was barely audible. Thank you. As the extender clicked into place, relief washed through her body, physical and emotional, but the humiliation lingered, heavy and stubborn. Greg moved down the aisle, his posture rigid. He didn't look back. As the plane prepared for takeoff, the cabin buzzed with hushed conversations. People leaned toward each other, whispering reactions. Some shook their heads. Some looked away, uncomfortable with what they'd witnessed. A few glanced at Alicia with sympathy, others with curiosity. Alicia focused on her breathing, one hand still on her belly. She felt her baby shift, a small reminder of why she needed to stay calm. She whispered softly, not caring who heard, "It's okay, we're okay." The plane lifted into the air, pressure pressing her back into the seat. Outside, the city shrank into patterns of light. Inside, Alicia's thoughts churned. She replayed Greg's words over and over, not the volume, but the meaning behind them, the assumption that her need was exaggerated, that her presence was inconvenient, that her body was somehow her fault. This wasn't new. It was just louder than usual. Midway through the flight, Greg returned to the aisle, checking seatbelts. When he reached Alicia's row, he hesitated. The extender was obvious now. He looked at it, then at her. For a brief second, something flickered across his face. Discomfort, maybe even doubt. "Seatbelt secure?" he asked flatly. "Yes," Alicia replied, meeting his eyes. He nodded and moved on, without another word. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't accountability, but it was acknowledgement, and Alicia took note of that. The younger flight attendant checked on her later, offering water and a snack without being asked. "If you need anything at all," she said, "please let me know." "I will," Alicia replied. This time, she meant it. The rest of the flight passed quietly. Alicia watched half a movie, then turned it off. She stared out the window instead, clouds stretching endlessly beneath them. Up here, everyone was suspended together, no matter who they were, no matter what assumptions they carried. As the plane began its descent, Alicia felt exhaustion settle into her bones. Not just physical tiredness, but the deeper kind that came from always having to defend your right to exist comfortably. When the wheels touched down, applause rippled through the cabin. People stood quickly, eager to leave. Alicia waited, as she often did now, letting the rush pass her by. The younger attendant returned once more. "Take your time," she said softly. As Alicia stood, she felt a surprising steadiness. The moment had shaken her, but it hadn't broken her. She stepped into the aisle, head held high. At the door, Greg stood again, thanking passengers automatically. When Alicia reached him, he paused. There was a long second of silence. "Have a safe journey," he said. Alicia looked at him, really looked at him, then nodded. "I intend to." She stepped into the jet bridge, the noise of the terminal rushing toward her. The incident would fade for some, become just another story overheard on a flight, but for Alicia it would stay with her, another reminder of how quickly dignity could be challenged, and how important it was to claim it anyway. She walked forward slowly, one hand on her belly, carrying not just herself, but a future she hoped would demand better than what she had just endured. As Alicia moved down the jet bridge, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead. Each step felt heavier than it should have, not because of the pregnancy alone, but because her body was still holding on to the tension of what had happened. Moments like that didn't end when the words stopped. They echoed, they replayed, they settled into places that were already tired. She paused near the wall, pretending to adjust her bag, giving herself a moment to breathe before stepping fully into the terminal. People streamed past her, focused on connections, baggage claims, reunions. To them, This was just another arrival. To Alicia, it felt like crossing a line between being watched and becoming invisible again. The man who had sat beside her on the plane walked by and slowed. "Hey," he said gently. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry you went through that. You handled it with a lot of grace." Alicia managed a small smile. "Thank you," she said. "I didn't feel graceful." "Sometimes grace doesn't feel like anything," he replied. "It just looks like survival." His words stayed with her as he walked away. She continued forward, painless but cautious, one hand instinctively supporting her lower back now. At baggage claim, she found a seat and lowered herself slowly, exhaling as the pressure eased. Around her, families reunited with laughter, couples argued quietly, airport staff called out instructions. Life moved fast here. There was no room for lingering pain unless you carried it yourself. As she waited, her phone buzzed. A message from her mother. "Landed yet?" Alicia stared at the screen for a moment before typing back. "Just landed. On my way soon." She didn't mention the incident. Not yet. Her mother worried enough already. While the carousel rattled to life, Alicia's mind drifted backward, uninvited. She remembered being a teenager, standing in a clothing store while a clerk followed her through every aisle. She remembered a professor who assumed she was on scholarship for the wrong reasons. She remembered the nurse who once told her she was surprisingly articulate. Each moment alone could be dismissed. Together, they formed a pattern too clear to ignore. She wondered, briefly, if Greg would remember her at all by the end of his shift, or if she would blur into a category in his mind. Difficult passenger, overreacted, slowed things down. That thought hurt more than she expected. Her suitcase appeared on the belt. She stood again, lifting it carefully, grateful that someone nearby wordlessly helped steady it. She murmured thanks and headed toward the exit, with a smell of coffee and exhaust mixed into that familiar airport scent. Outside, her sister waited in the pickup lane, waving when she spotted Alicia. Relief washed over her face as Alicia approached. "There you are," her sister said, pulling her into a careful hug. "How was the flight?" Alicia hesitated. "Just for a second." Then she said, "Long." Her sister studied her face. "Long? How?" Alicia sighed and leaned against the car door. "I'll tell you on the drive." As they merged onto the highway, Alicia recounted what happened. She kept her voice steady, factual. But when she repeated Greg's words, her throat tightened despite herself. Her sister gripped the steering wheel harder. "He said that to you? On a plane?" "Yes." "While you're pregnant?" "Yes." Her sister shook her head, anger flashing across her face. "That's unacceptable." "I know," Alicia said. "But it happens." "That doesn't make it okay," her sister replied. "No," Alicia agreed softly. "It doesn't." That night, after a warm meal and a long shower, Alicia lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic. Her baby shifted again, a slow roll beneath her skin. "I'm trying," she whispered, not sure who she was speaking to. "I'm trying to make this world gentler for you." Sleep came in fragments. Each time she drifted off, she found herself back in the airplane aisle, Greg's voice sharp, the eyes on her. She woke before dawn, heart racing, hand instinctively pressed to her belly. In the days that followed, the incident resurfaced in unexpected ways. A friend asked how the flight was. A coworker emailed about maternity leave paperwork. A stranger commented on how strong she must be to travel while pregnant. Strong, the word followed her everywhere. One afternoon, while scrolling absent-mindedly through her phone, Alicia came across a video. Someone had filmed part of the incident, not the worst of it, but enough. The angle was shaky, the sound imperfect, but Greg's tone was unmistakable. The caption read, "Flight attendant humiliates pregnant woman for asking for seatbelt extender." Her stomach dropped. The video had already gathered thousands of views. Comments scrolled endlessly. Some were supportive. She deserved better. "This is discrimination, plain and simple. Why do people think pregnancy means inconvenience?" Others were cruel. "She's playing the victim. She's too big to fly. She shouldn't. Always looking for special treatment." Alicia put the phone down, hands shaking. She felt exposed all over again, like the plane had followed her home. Her sister found her like that a few minutes later. "Is it?" Alicia said. "Someone filmed it." Her sister sat beside her. "Do you want it taken down?" "I don't know." Alicia replied honestly. Part of me does, part of me doesn't. Because, as painful as it was, the video also showed something else. It showed people speaking up. It showed that she hadn't imagined it, that it wasn't just her sensitivity. It was real, and others could see it too. That night, Alicia typed a post of her own. She didn't name the airline. She didn't insult Greg. She simply told the story from her perspective. She wrote about safety, about dignity, about how exhausting it was to have to justify your needs. Before posting, she hesitated. She thought about her child, about what kind of world they would inherit. Then she pressed publish. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from strangers sharing similar experiences, pregnant women, elderly passengers, disabled travelers, people who had been told, in one way or another, that their needs were inconvenient. Alicia read until her eyes burned. Among the messages was one from the airline, a formal apology, an assurance they were investigating the matter, an invitation to speak with customer relations. She stared at it for a long time. Days later, she agreed to a call. The representative was polite, carefully empathetic. Policies were mentioned. Training was discussed. The words felt familiar, almost scripted. What do you want to see change? The representative asked. Alicia thought for a moment. I want your staff to believe people when they ask for help, she said. I want them to stop deciding who deserves dignity. There was a pause on the line. We'll take that feedback seriously, the representative replied. When the call ended, Alicia wasn't sure how much would actually change, but she knew one thing for certain. She hadn't stayed silent. Weeks passed. Her pregnancy advanced. The incident slowly stopped being the first thing she thought about each morning. But it didn't disappear. It became part of her story, folded into the larger narrative of who she was becoming. One evening, as she folded tiny baby clothes, Alicia felt a sudden wave of emotion. She sat down, pressing a onesie to her chest. I hope you don't have to be this strong, she murmured. But if you do, I hope you know you're not alone. Somewhere, on another flight, Greg continued working. Perhaps he'd been retrained, perhaps reprimanded, perhaps unchanged. Alicia would never really know. What she did know was this: 5 minutes of cruelty had rippled outward in ways no one could fully control, and in its wake, something else had formed: connection, awareness, a refusal to quietly accept less. The next time Alicia boarded a plane, she asked for what she needed without apology, and when the extender was handed to her without question, she fastened it, took a breath, and allowed herself to believe just a little that change, however slow, was possible.